What is up, guys? Welcome back to Just a Guy on My Lunch Break, talking fight sports. If you would, right out of the gate, don't think, just hit the subscribe button. Give it a little tappy tap tap, okay? Also, this is my second channel. I have another one called Just a Guy on My Lunch Break. That one's a little bigger, just recently monetized. I do talk about UFC, some influence boxing stuff over there, but also I just touch on popular news, pop culture topics as well. So if you would, I'm going to put that link down in the description, and if you subscribed to this channel, you'll probably like that one too. Go over there and click that and subscribe to me over there as well. I would very much appreciate it. So there was a few fights that were on the prelims here that I really wanted to touch on. Three specifically. The first one was Movsar Evloev and Aljamain Sterling. So Evloev is 18-0 in this division. It's hard to get to 18-0, so that lets you know how dominant he's been on his MMA run so far. 18 fight win streak. Obviously, he hasn't lost, so obviously it's quite a long win streak there. 3 wins by knockout, 4 wins by submission. So you're not looking at a guy that is going to knock people out. Not saying that it can't happen. He only has 3 wins by knockout, and there's 4 by submission. I don't expect this to be a really, really fun, exciting fight. You got Aljamain Sterling, the human backpack. Then you have Evloev, who, let's get real, 11 fights by decision. Okay, if you look at his record, decision. Literally, every fight he's had in the UFC has been a decision. So you kind of know what you're getting here. But I'm here to kind of break it down, and I'm here to kind of make a pick. All right? Both of these guys are predominantly ground fighters. Aljamain, being a former champion, is obviously known for that. I think that the buck stops here for Evloev. Okay? And, Aljamain Sterling was definitely really big at bantamweight. Up here in the featherweight division, I don't think he's as big, so I don't think his size and strength play quite as much into an advantage as it did at bantamweight for Aljamain Sterling. With that said, I just think he edges this out and gives Evloev his first loss, guys, because if you look at Evloev's most recent few opponents, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but Arnold Allen by unanimous decision. Okay, Arnold Allen is not a grappler. Arnold Allen's predominantly a striker and predominantly does strike in his fights. Diego Lopez, that's a good win. Diego Lopez is the man right now, but again, he's not necessarily known as a dominant grappler. He's more of a stand-up guy, okay? So, good win, but he's not facing any guys who have the sort of grappling pedigree as Aljamain Sterling right now. Dan Ige, he beat Dan Ige by unanimous decision. Another perfect example. Dan Ige's a great fighter, one of the top in the division. But listen, Dan Ige is not a striker. Dan Ige is not a grappler. Not saying he can't grapple, but that's not his bread and butter, okay? So I think that Movsar Evloev has run into a challenge here that he's not going to be able to get over. You look at Aljamain Sterling, 24-4 overall. Obviously he's been champion, 28 fights, and again, only 3 wins by knockout. Aljamain's not going to be knocking you out in there. 8 wins by submission. Aljamain's thing is chokes. You got to stay off of those chokes or stay away from those chokes. And that's the thing. He is so good at getting guys down and then edging his way to their backs by getting up under their armpit and crawling himself around to get on people's backs. And if he gets you there, he lives there. It's really hard for guys once he takes that backpack position for guys to get out of it because he's just such a strong guy, and he knows exactly what he's doing. So he's always kind of a step ahead in that area. Okay, so I'm going to have to say that Aljamain Sterling is going to win a unanimous decision here. Now, Evloev is a really, really good fighter. I don't think that he will get submitted by Aljamain Sterling. I think he's good enough to keep from getting submitted, but I just don't think he and his team are ready for the type of grappling pedigree and game that Aljamain Sterling is bringing, okay? Evloev's last several opponents, most of his opponents, in my opinion, I think Evloev has been somewhat lucky so far since he's been into the UFC because many of his opponents are predominantly strikers. Okay. And he has been given these guys, I mean, Choi, Barzola, Grundy, Nick Lentz, Dawoodu, Ige, Dan Ige, Diego Lopez. I mean, literally all of these guys are more so known for their striking. So he's definitely going to be in a position where this is the best grappler that he's faced in the UFC, bar none. Okay, Aljamain is going to be that for uh, is going to be that for Evloev. So I just think he gets his first one on his record here. I think that Aljamain's probably going to backpack him, kind of control him on the ground to a decision. There is one other way that I see this fight possibly going. Since both of these guys are such dominant grapplers, there's always that possibility that you see two grapplers stand up and have a sweet kickboxing match. Aljamain, he's not horrible on the feet. It's not his bread and butter, obviously, but he's not horrible there. Evloev either. Both of these guys can throw hands a little bit if they need to. And I think it may be one of those things where they're a little bit scared to go to the ground with one another because each of them has a history of being so dominant in that area. Maybe they just don't want to test that with one another and they stand up and have a kickboxing match. If that's the case, I'm probably going to have to lean more towards Evloev in that I think he's a little bit better of a striker. And so this pick is weird for me. If it stays on the ground, which is where I think it probably will, I'm going Aljamain by decision. If it stays on the feet, I'm going Evloev by decision. Okay, so we'll see what happens. Covering both bases there. All right, the other one I wanted to go over is Anthony Smith versus Dominic Reyes. I love Anthony Smith. I'm an old head. I love Anthony Smith. He's got a ton of experience. 58? This will be his 59th fight, guys, in the UFC. 19 wins by knockout, 15 wins by submission. He definitely is a guy who's good everywhere and can do both or do everything, but I have an issue with Anthony Smith. I think Anthony Smith is a little bit delusional in thinking that he's a little better these days than he actually is. Okay? Now, I think there's a reason for that. He's on the analyst desk. Okay? He has the podcast now with Michael Bisping. I love all that because I like to see these guys set themselves up for a future career after they retire from the fight game. Okay? So, good thing, all good things, but that stuff I think definitely has kind of taken his eyes off of, you know, being hungry for that belt. I think he feels that he has a definite, seat at the table, no pun intended, at the analyst desk. And he and Michael Bisping have run a successful podcast together. He's, got a seat at the table there. So I think he's looking at this. He can say what he wants to in public, but I don't think he's hungry for that belt like he claims to be. Okay, and it just shows in his performances, and it also shows when he steps in there like on quick notice like that. You get my drift? I mean, he's done that several times where it's like, dude, come on. We know you don't need the money like that. You've been doing this a long time. You're an analyst. You got the Bisping podcast. We know you don't need the money. Why are you stepping in there on 13 days notice against a killer like Khalil Roundtree? Why are you doing that? You know, it might not have been 13 days. I'm just making that shit up, but it was pretty quick. He stepped in last moment. Um, and Dominic Reyes is one of those. He was a world beater back in the 2021, and then he lost the decision to John Jones, which a lot of people thought he won, I'd like to add. But after he lost that decision, something happened. I don't know if his chin just literally turned to glass, or if it just so happens that it was the luck of the draw and he got in there with some guys that just clipped him and then he wasn't able to take it. I mean, obviously, you can't throw off on Reyes too much. I mean, his losses are to. Uh, well, let me give you the last few. Um, Jan Blachowicz. Well, I mean, how could you lose to that killer? Shame on you, Dominic Reyes. I mean, most people have lost to Blachowicz. Prohaska, both of those guys, former champions. Again, not a horrible loss, but it was like three in a row, and then he lost to Ryan Spann. I felt like he should have beat Ryan Spann. I think he's a better fighter than Ryan Spann is, but he lost. KO TKO, and it was just by getting clipped, and he had a stretch there where he just couldn't seem to not get shut off when he got hit with something, and it didn't even seem like they were specifically really hard punches. He just got caught just the right way, and he just couldn't survive it. Um, but last fight against Dustin Jacoby, going into that fight, I was really excited to see Dominic back in there, but I was concerned because my thought process was, man, if he loses this one, I don't know. That's not going to be good for him. 4 losses in a row. And especially, let's get real, the UFC's been known to start thinking about letting guys go when they say, unless you're Tony Ferguson or somebody like that, they start letting people go when you get up around the 4, 5 losses in a row. You understand? Unless you're a person who is in really good with the company, like Dominic Cruz or who's the other one that just said Dominic Cruz, or like Tony Ferguson, or one of those original Ultimate Fighter guys. You know what I mean? But I feel like he should have beat Ryan Spann. He did get the win over Jacoby, and that was a first round KO TKO. Listen, Dominic Reyes is not a grappler. He has 7 takedowns attempted. 7. 7. So he's not trying to take you down. He's trying to have a stand-up boxing and kickboxing match, mostly boxing. Um, and with that, against Anthony Smith, I think he is good enough. He being Dominic Reyes, former college football player, really, really big, long, athletic, strong guy in all the right places, especially the legs and the, football player, man. Um, and Anthony Smith is a good jiu-jitsu guy, but he's not a wrestler. He's not a sambo guy. These jiu-jitsu guys aren't going to rush in there and get you and pick you up and take you down. They're not going to do a blast double leg and get, jiu-jitsu guys they work their magic once they're on the ground. If somebody takes them down, or if they end up on their backs in an exchange or something like that, that's where the jiu-jitsu guys like Anthony Smith shine. Okay? But he's not the kind of guy that's really going to be able to get somebody down, especially somebody like Dominic Reyes. And I just see if Anthony Smith, okay, cut to the chase, Corey. Anthony Smith is going to need to take this down to the canvas if he wants to beat Dominic Reyes, basically, is exactly what I'm saying. Okay? I don't think he'll be able to do that. I think Dominic Reyes is big enough, good enough, strong enough to stay on the feet, and then I think Anthony Smith is going to be in trouble there. He might get him down once or twice, but I think Spann will just stand right back up, and I think Anthony Smith is going to be stuck on the feet with Dominic Reyes, and Dominic Reyes has power. So I'm leaning towards a KO. Maybe round 3, Anthony Smith is good enough to stay away from most of the dangerous exchanges, but could be a possibility that Dominic wins, like maybe a unanimous decision as well. He's going to be gunning for that KO. He always is. Okay. All right. Moving on up. There's one more I want to do. Brian Battle versus Randy Brown. This is a good one. One reason Brian Battle has the perfect name for this sport, Battle. Literally. I mean, dude, you're telling me you're a UFC fighter and your last name's Battle? Sick, bro. You better be good, if your last name's Battle and you're a cage fighter, okay? Um, but he's from the same state that I am. He's from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina. Brian Battle lives and trains an hour down the road from where I live. So that's pretty cool. I like that. It's like supporting your hometown team. So I'm definitely going to be pulling for Brian Battle in this. In his last fight against Giuseppe, uh, I mean, he just looked, whew, the pace that he set blew my mind, bro. Brian Battle he set a pace in that fight like he was a flyweight. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had to relook at it. I was like, are you sure this is the welterweight division? These guys are fighting at 170 and he's going in hard like this. And this is the last fight, Josette was fighting in his home country. He didn't want to lose either. So it wasn't like he went away easily. He was in the fight, and this is a lot of like in pocket throwing and Battle just has a really, really good killer instinct. And once he gets in there and starts getting in close with guys and touching them and hitting them to the body and to the head, and I rewatched that fight recently. I mean, it's a damn good fight. And it was one of those where if Josette would have been any less of a fighter, he would have gotten finished way quicker than what he got finished. But he just hung in there, hung in there, hung in there, and they ended up being a little over halfway through the second round before Battle finally got him out of there, and the ref had to save Josette from himself. Yeah, he wasn't going to go down or out. The ref literally had to step in and wave it off because he was just getting demolished. Okay, before that, Battle had a win over Fletcher. Before that, Green, and that's yeah. I got and the last fight that he lost was against Fakhretdinov, and that was a unanimous decision. Fakhretdinov is obviously very, very tough himself, so no shame in that loss. But I think in this, he's going to have his hands full with Randy Brown. Randy Brown, extremely tall, lanky for this division, 6'3". Okay, you look at uh, some of his recent. He's got 5 wins by submission, but if you look at his recent fights, he has a win over Dos Santos, had a win over Silikov, which that's that's pretty good because Silikov has a really good stand-up attack, but it's just hard to get in on these guys that are 6'3" at 170 pounds. You understand? Before that, Turman had a win over Turman, decision win. Um, the last fight that he lost was against Jack Della Maddalena, which no shame in that. I was actually impressed there because I thought that might be the first sign of trouble that we saw from Maddalena. And I'm telling you, after that fight, after seeing him put Brown away the way he did, I'm on that train. This is one of those fights where my first impulse is to pick Randy Brown. He's got the height, he's got the length, he possibly has the technique in terms of his boxing at least, but Brian Battle is really tough everywhere. He's got 6 wins by submission, 4 by knockout, 3 first round finishes. What I like about Brian Battle in this situation is his grit and his toughness. And it is not often you see a person fighting at welterweight to put on that kind of lung stinging performance. I mean, this dude's cardio is legit. Legit. And I guess I didn't realize how good his cardio was until I saw that last fight with him and Giuseppe. Um, I think that Randy Brown's going to have his moments, touching up Brian Battle a little bit in the first round, maybe even into the second round a little bit. After that, I feel like mid to late second round, Brian Battle's going to start coming on a little bit, going to start crushing that distance and coming in and getting close to him, getting the clinch position with Randy Brown a little bit. Randy Brown, these taller guys are much better from length, much better from distance. If you can close that void and get in there close to them in the clinch, they're not quite as successful there, with the longer limbs and stuff like that. Even if it's not that they're not necessarily as successful, their opponents, shorter opponents, can be more successful if they're able to get inside. Brian Battle is really, really good at that, and he's really, really good at closing that space and just pressing the action and pushing guys up against the fence, getting their backs against the fence and then unleashing. He's not the kind of guy that's going to push somebody up against the fence and just hold them there. No siree. Brian Battle, when he gets you up against the fence, he is throwing, kicking, throwing, elbowing, kneeing. He is doing something at all time. He truly lives up to his name of Battle. That guy, when he steps in that octagon, he goes to battle. So I think on into the second round, Randy Brown is going to start to slow down a little bit. And I think he's not going to be able to maintain the pace of Brian Battle. And I think Brian Battle is going to get Randy Brown out of there. I sure do. I think it's going to happen probably sometime in the third round, maybe the end of the second. But Randy Brown's tough, and I do see Brian Battle having a little trouble at first, trying to figure out the distance and everything. Randy Brown's such a tall guy for that division, obviously. But once he figures that out, once, the pop in that jab a little bit from Randy Brown starts to slow down, I believe that Brian Battle is just going to slowly but surely start to take over and start to drown him in just sheer activity. So I'm choosing Brian Battle to get him out of there in the third round. That's all I got. Hey, guys, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to go to the description and subscribe to my other channel, Just a Guy on My Lunch Break. Hope you guys have a wonderful night. Enjoy the fights this weekend. I will see you on the next one.